today, I really would like to see emphasis given on how you support innovative ideas. We have an industry that is constantly evolving. Who would have known 2 years ago about sweepstakes or prediction markets? When you mix in these other continents, it became clear that there was just a need to pull everybody together.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is another episode of iGaming History. I have the super duper pleasure, delight to be joined today by the legend, the lovely, the absolute Sue Schneider. Sue, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Glad to be on.
Pleasure having you,
And I'm
Sue.
glad that you're capturing all these stories. That's great.
There should be a place for the memory of the industry, right? So I saw it. I saw that there was immediate interest. So I said, why not? Because
Good.
it's fun. It's very fun. So we're not here to talk about me, right? We're here to write your story down. If I'm not mistaken, you started in social services, right? Who was Sue Schneider before iGaming and all this wonderful career?
Yeah, it was a bit of a switch from what I'm doing now. That's for sure. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in not-for-profit administration, and I ran a social service agency for 12 years that was aimed at kids 12 who had run away or had been abused or neglected. So we did a emergency shelter, a group home, crisis hotline, foster care, alternative school, all kinds of things. So it was a really interesting era. And oddly enough, it was probably the time when I learned the most about public policy because we had to go in DC and advocate for funding for these kids and that sort of thing. So that's really where I became a policy wonk, I'd say.
If you don't mind me asking, what was the motivation behind that? Did you have like a story in your life that led you to being motivated to do that?
No, I not really. I think it was just an interest in the local community. Um, the kids here, the reason that agency got started was because we had a county jail, and was the only place for these kids for them to put them. So they were putting them in the jail when they were abused and neglected and need social services. So some of the a sheriff's deputy and a chaplain at the jail got started with this program, and I was a volunteer at first as a counselor, and they ended up hiring me about 2 months before I graduated college. So that was kind of exciting there at the end of my college career to try to work part-time, started a social service agency, and finish up college.
And then Missouri legalized riverboat gaming. That changed everything for you, right? How did you come into that world and start
Yeah.
rolling good times?
Yeah. I had run the social service agency for 12 years, and then I spent about 10 years being a freelance writer, editor, doing contract work. I ran the local convention authority, just all kinds of weird things. I ended up in 93 editing a Riverboat Gaming publication, just as my editorial kind of work that I did. And in 95, the woman that owned that said, "Hey, there's this thing called the internet. Do you want to partner on putting the publication online?" And I was like, "Sure." I have a tendency to do things that get in my way. I'm not a planner when it comes to my own career, so it's been kind of interesting in that regard. So we started Rolling Good Times in '95, and in hindsight, it really was one of the first affiliate sites. That wasn't even a term at that point in time, but some of our first advertisers that we had on there, one was called Interlotto, which was out of Liechtenstein. One was PAF, which is still in existence, and it's in the Åland Islands
Mhm.
in the European area. And then we started getting hooked up with people in the Caribbean that were operating out of the Caribbean, South Africa. It became global very quickly. So that was a real learning experience. It was a lot of fun at that point in time.
Do you remember if there was a moment when you thought, okay, this internet thing isn't just a trend, it's like here to stay, this is the future?
I think I believed that from the very beginning. I remember going to the big trade show at the time. It was a precursor to G2 Las Vegas. And I remember talking with a guy from one of the land-based game companies, and he goes, "Ah, internet." He goes, "That's the CB of the '90s, the citizen band radio." He thought it was a flash in the pan, and I never did think that. I always thought it had staying power, and I was just drawn to it just because of the fact that it was so international in scope. I just found it interesting to make friends all around the world right out of the chute. Australia,
Mhm.
again, Africa, all over the place. It was really a pretty heady time in that regard when you realize what's there. And my interest has always been in community building. That's first degree thesis was on networking and community building. So that's just always been something that I've enjoyed and really can be pretty good at.
Mm. And I think in '96 you made the Interactive Gambling Council, right? Well, the industry was still
Yeah,
considered Wild West by the time. And
very
like,
much so.
what made you think that that online gambling needed a voice? Is it also a motivation like this one, like the whole community building?
That was a lot of it. You know, a lot of the development and creativity was going on in Canada at the time, in Toronto and Vancouver. And so, when you mix in these other continents, it became clear that um, there was just a need to pull everybody together. And in the US, really from day one, we had threats from the standpoint of bans that were being put forward in Congress. There was a Kyle bill that really was trying to ban it outright. And it took them a long time to accomplish that. But it was really clear that there was a voice to be had. And to be honest with you, the offshore guys were not going to step up because they felt like they were at risk. So, I had an events company and publications, and I thought, okay, well, how much trouble could I get in? So that's why I ended up, I chaired that for 8 years, couldn't get anybody else to chair it. It was at one point we had 120 members,
Hmm.
companies. Um, so, I mean, it grew very quickly, and, we hired lobbyists, and it became a whole method of communicating even from the consumer standpoint for people to be able to get with their um, legislators and say, look, what are you trying to ban this? This is our money. It's this entertainment for us. We want to do it. So that was that was really kind of a 10-year battle.
What did it feel like for you to testify in Congress back at that? Were you afraid? Were you thinking, this is crazy? What was going through your mind?
I did because I did that twice, and it was scary. What scared me is the first time I did it, there was a site offshore called World Sports Exchange. They actually put up um, a market on whether the Kyle bill, the ban, would pass or not. And when I came in to testify, we actually ran that on our River City Group site it was called Rolling Good Times Online. And so I go in to sit down to testify, and they put up that site. They put up our site with that market on it, and I thought, "Oh, man, I'm gonna be in big trouble here." So that threw me off a little bit. It was scary.
How did you deal with it?
I just plowed through with my remarks, and I thought, "Oh, I'm going for it." It didn't throw me off for a long time, but it was not something I was expecting. So I thought, "Okay, we're in the big leagues here."
All right. So then there's the story of GIGSE, I think, that became kind of a pilgrimage site for the early pioneers in iGaming. Can you describe what the spirit of the time was like for us, like
Yeah.
30 years ago?
Yeah, it was interesting times. Ac- Actually, I had split off from the owner of Good Times Online, but in '99 we split up. I took the B2B side, iGaming news and the events. She took the consumer side because my dirty little secret is I don't play, so it's hard for me to do a consumer side of how to win at
Very.
blackjack when I don't play. Um, so in '99, there had been a couple other companies that had tried to do or had done events. And in '99, when we split off, I thought, you know what? We could do this. We could do this really well. So in '99, we started GIGSE. The first one was in Vancouver. And then after that, they kept alternating between Toronto and Montreal, both of which were big hubs for companies in the industry. So it just seemed like the right time to be able to pull all those people together. I mean, and the way we ended up building out that company is GIGSE was the global one in the name, and then we did one in that started out in Australasia. It started out in, believe it or not, Alice Springs in the Northern Territory, out in the middle of nowhere, and then moved to Sydney, and then ultimately we moved that one to Macau to cover that whole region. Um, we did one in Europe that we did with Clarion called European iGaming Summit. We did a number of other ones, World Poker Congress, and 3 or 4 other like specialized kind of sites based on the product and events. It just seemed like a good time, and we were very, very fortunate. It was definitely the right time to get into the events and publication industry, and you know events like that and publications really kind of thrive on controversy and uncertainty and things like that. People come because number one, they want to learn about what's going on and see where things, and then to come together, again through like Interactive Gaming Council and things like that, because there's a friend of mine who's given me the term coopetition, which I love and use all the time, because when you bring competitors together for a common goal to try to move the industry forward and get policies in place and things like that that are going to help the industry and help the player. So it's been quite a journey.
And speaking of Clarion, it acquired River City Group. How did that feel for you? Did it feel like you were closing a chapter or starting a new one?
Well, I hadn't really planned on selling at that point in time, and it was kind of a practical reason. The federal government at the time was looking at just really jacking up the capital gains tax, and I thought, let's check
Mm,
now and see if now is a good time to sell. One of the services that River City Group did was brokerage. We would help companies in the industry sell to other companies. So we were familiar with brokerage, and we knew who the 3 prospects were for buying us. So we kind of went through the process and ended up selling to Clarion in 2006. We sold to them. We closed in early July, and then within like 2 months, there were legal actions taken against some operators here in the U.S., and then the Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act was passed in like September. So
mhm,
it was problematic in that regard.
mhm. But after the sale, you still stayed in the industry. So MIGS, there was iGaming North America, right? All sorts of publications, the Gaming Law Review. Why stay? Why not just call it quits and do something else?
Um, yeah, we actually stayed on with Clarion for 3 years, my whole staff, and then they came and shut down the whole U.S. business. And then after that, I got involved with iGaming North America, and then the one in Malta, MIGS. Um, I find once you get in the industry, you don't get out. It's family. It's still fascinating. It's a challenge. Um, and it's just really, it's a good time. So why leave? And clearly, I mean, I'm way past retirement age, but I can't stop. So such is life.
Kelly told me that you were in Paris. She in Paris won't let you retire
Right.
yet.
Not yet.
um, Thinking about all your time in the industry, what do you think has been the toughest thing that you had to do, and what has been the most exciting thing that you've done?
Well, I think I had a period with River City Group where I had to, readjust and lay off staff, and that was hard. I hated that. I cried when I was telling everybody because you go through those up and downs when you have your own company, and the upside is great, but when you have to do things like lay off people that really you work with daily and are part of your family, it's hard. And I think really when Clarion came and shut down the whole U.S. office, that was probably the hardest. I happen to have a fair number of literal family members that worked in the organization because I have a very, very talented family. And so it just that was probably the hardest thing. And I think the most fun part is still going on. I mean, I love what we're doing now with trying to stimulate innovation in the industry and seeing what the startups are doing, and it's just very lively, very exciting, very creative, and trying to help some of them navigate through the industry. And we have a weird industry in that, like, today's loophole is an innovation, but the government doesn't really, they'll never keep up, so that's a
Yeah.
problem. But it's interesting in that regard to watch things play out.
Would you consider that this is the standard? The innovation is a loophole usually.
Well, that's how it's been for the last 30 years. I don't know if that will keep up, but I still found a paper recently from a New Zealand regulator. This was in the 90s when we had him speak at events down there. And, he said that the legal and regulatory side will never be able to keep up with the level of innovation that comes in this industry. So it has to be more of a partnership. Otherwise, you're stifling it. And it is problematic. I mean, I can tell you specific ways that it's, licensing costs for startups to go into multiple jurisdictions is staggering. There are caps on how much an investor can put into a startup without having to go through a whole licensing process, which is very expensive, time consuming, and very intrusive. So, there are a variety of ways that we just need to keep educating people and say, look, let's figure out how to come up with some solutions for this.
I was thinking even for the state stuff, because it's regulation state by state or country by country, we just need to officially make it to space. And then we will have regulators based in space and then in sections of space. And that is going to be the loophole of the future. Just my two cents. Don Juan of tomorrow is just some guy operating from behind the moon, probably.
Well, at one point there was a licensing jurisdiction that was on a platform just off the coast of England. It was like an old, I don't even know what the original use
Isle
for
of
it
Man?
was. No, no,
There's no.
no. I mean, literally, it was like a 20 by 20-foot platform that was in the ocean, and they were putting servers on it. It was crazy.
Like
So,
this is the trick. This is the trick. How you play with space, how you play
yeah.
with space and time.
Well,
It,
and I do have to give credit to, there is an International Association of Gaming Regulators, and I don't think they've been very successful, or it hasn't been a priority. Have tried to have uniformity, at least among standards. Because, again, 10 years ago, there weren't any compliance companies. Now there's probably 10 compliance companies out there
you
that
know,
do nothing but help a licensee navigate through all that. How do you keep up with the changes? How do you, work your way through multiple licensing applications that are asking the same thing?
yeah.
So there have been attempts with that group to try to harmonize those and I have a crazy idea, and I don't think anybody's done it yet, to just have a blockchain system that, I mean, the regulators can own it or something to um, to put all of that in there so that you're not doing so much duplication because the time and staff attention and cost is just it's bad enough for companies that are making money. For startups, it's problematic.
I think your idea is very good. It's very progressive, and somebody just needs to give attention to it. I think somebody will at some point. But it's just this: there has to be like a country somewhere, somehow, who wants to attract, and they want to attract it through this method, and that's
Hmm.
it. Well, that's probably
Yeah,
what's going to happen.
it's let's do it.
Uh, I do find it very interesting because I had Charles Cohen on the show, who, by the way,
Hmm.
says hi. And like, I hear this perspective that regulation cannot keep up with the technology, and many people say it. He is on the flip side of the coin, and he said that regulation is ahead of the tech because you have a proper example that he gave was with the KYC. Because you need back in 2000, you didn't need people didn't do KYC when they joined the casino, right? But then the regulator demanded one, but it had to be done in a certain way, because otherwise nobody would sign up on the casinos, right? And
Hmm.
all these KYC providers popped up, and it created a cottage industry within the industry.
Hmm.
So I think that's an interesting perspective as well. But it's nice to see how it looks from both ends,
Yeah,
um, of
and
the.
again, I mean, I think it's just going to take a different level of cooperation among the licensing jurisdictions to move something like that forward. And maybe they're not motivated, and maybe it's problematic for them. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is that we can't move forward faster on trying to get something like that that would help with the licensing side of things because it is a real problem.
I think incentivization is one issue. Yes, like there's not motivation behind it, but maybe it's still, oddly enough, maybe it's still too early. Maybe they
It
will.
could be. That would be I'm not gonna live long enough the way things are going, but I never thought sports betting in the US would be legal in my lifetime either. I mean, so I was wrong on that.
Here we are. Here we are. I wanted lovely conversation. I just want to push it back into our trajectory, so to speak.
Mhm.
Like, when you look at all the people who became giants in the industry, what traits do you think they all share?
Probably number 1, they were risk takers.
Okay.
And they were very creative and were able to build amazing teams of people to develop out their products, whatever it might be, and move it, push it out into the market. So, I have a book in me if I ever had any self discipline, in writing about probably 5 to 10 of some of those folks, and particularly the ones in the U.S. who really got pushed offshore, just because of the U.S. phobia and attitude about iGaming, which is shifted to a certain extent with the sports betting, not so much on the casino side. So, I just think there's still a lot of history as you're doing, which is again, I applaud you for to be able to look at some of those stories and see how some of those companies came through because it was an amazing time. And when you had a lack of regulation, it was really they could kind of do what they wanted, and then the regulation followed. And so, that's when things started to get a little more stiff, I guess, in terms of a little more rigid. So it stifled some of that, but it's still out there.
Hmm. You've been advising lawmakers for decades. What is something that you think regulators still misunderstand about the industry?
I saw that question and I was like, I'm not sure. I just came back from the National Council of Legislators from gaming states, and those are the lawmakers. There are a lot of regulators there also. So I think it's a matter of trying to balance out between what they think is good for their jurisdictions. I mean, they're typically looking for tax revenue, they're looking for player protection, they're looking for jobs if possible, which is something that our side of the industry isn't able to offer like the land-based world does. I think it just they need continuing education because we have an industry that is constantly evolving. I mean, who would have known 2 years ago about sweepstakes or prediction markets or all these things that are popping up, and are very controversial because they're new. I think continuing education on that, which you can get by going to these association conferences to let them know, well, here's how it's working now, and we hope you are able to put together a system that will allow for that and allow it to bloom.
Mhm. What excited most about US after PASPA? How did you see the future?
Well, I didn't think we would get the take up as quickly as we did. I mean, I think we're close to 40 states now and or territories. DC is in there and some other ones. Um, it's I just didn't think it would happen that quickly. And I've been surprised on the flip side about how slowly the iGaming casino side of legalization has gone. I think we only have 7 states for that. So that one's lagging, and I think that's where you saw the sweepstakes and other ones kind of come into play because at that point in time, they were like, "Hey, there's a market out there. There's interest. We're showing that there's interest." So I would hope a lot of the jurisdictions would take that into account, but I think, again, there are still a lot of land-based companies that not a lot, but a few that feel like they're threatened by that and that takes away from their land-based business. So, that still has to be sorted out.
Mhm. You helped shape some of the conferences and the conversations around sports betting in the US. Did you ever think or did you see patterns that repeated themselves?
Um, yeah, sports betting has been going on here for a long time, and even like in the '90s when we started with River City Group and Rolling Good Times, um, it was all pretty much offshore at that point, other than your local corner bookie, college friend, whoever you're doing that with. I think it's been interesting to watch just how that's developed. Even some of the folks that have been offshore have been successful at coming in to the US. I think that'll still kind of sort itself out. But I mean, you're already seeing consolidation. I mean, I think some of these jurisdictions like Colorado and even Ontario and Canada, and some of them started out with a big gold rush. You had, I don't know, 30, 40 operators that came in, and that shakeout has already happened in some of those where some of those folks have already said, "No, too competitive for us." And here in Missouri, we just went through that. We had a couple that, or one or two that pulled out because it already was going to be kind of competitive, and so you never really know the decision making that goes on in a specific company on which jurisdiction they're going to aim for.
Hmm. Let's talk a bit about Defy the Odds. Yeah, so it's yours, Kelly's, and Paris's brainchild. Yeah, you were talking
Mhm.
Curacao. Like, what made you say we have to build this?
Well, we were all kind of in a spot where we were looking for something a little bit new and different, and we've always had a soft spot, all 3 of us, and we've known each other. In Paris, I've known for 30 years. Collectively, the 3 of us have, like, 80 years in the industry. The innovation side is just fun. But it needs help. I mean, it's just gotten harder and harder for new companies to come into the space because of the cost. They may be coming in from a different industry. They don't know the players. So that's why we decided to do this, and we did it with the intent of we're not funding ourselves, but we tie together. I describe it as we're trying to be the glue between the investors, the startups, the subject matter experts, the regulators, all of that is pulling all those people together, which is why we designed the online community that we have now called Empower, and that's just really now getting up and running. We've got more and more startups coming in every day. We're getting ready to reach out to those other components of the industry to bring them into that, to make sure that they really have an opportunity to interact and learn from each other. So it's been fun. We've been having a good time at it.
What do you think startups are getting wrong?
My biggest um, red flag when I talk with a new startup is when they do their competitive analysis. And I've been kind of preaching this a lot lately, so it might be old news to people that I've talked with, but I can't stress that enough. People we'll talk with startups and they'll go, we'll say, "Who are your competitors?" I go, "Oh, no, we don't have any." And it's like, "Well, do you know that company?" "No." "Do you know that company?" "No." And maybe they don't have all of the components of what you're doing, but they have a piece of it, and you should be looking at how they're operating. So that's probably my biggest concern when people come in is you cannot do enough research to find out who's in that space, how they've operated, who was in a space 5 years ago and didn't make it, and why. So those are the kind of things that I think are really, really important, and we tend to see more often than we should that people haven't really done enough homework in that regard.
I mean, I've seen it too. There's a lot of, I don't want to say delusion, but there are people coming with big dreams, thinking that it's casino and there's free money here and whatnot. And they think that any idea is going to fly. But the fact of the matter is, I feel that the industry is very well educated and super sharp, and that if you ask for money, you'd better have a good reason to ask for it and figure out what everybody else is doing and why there's a space for you here.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's very unlikely to fly. What I wanted
Mhm.
to ask is that so the industry, to a certain extent, the industry is small. Yeah, like a lot of people know each other, and you occasionally have even projects that just copy each other or happen to appear having the same theme or trying to do something really similar. In an industry like this, how do you shift from being a gatekeeper to somebody who connects? Because when you have a project that is similar to others, the natural tendency would be to keep it for yourself, right? And like not divulge too much. But on the other
Well, I think for me personally, I think the connecting part just comes naturally. I've just always been like that, even when I've done other things. So that part is kind of easy, but I think people come in a lot of times they're kind of arrogant and it's like, "Oh, we're going to revolutionize the industry," and we'll look at it and it's like, "No, so and so's doing that right over there." So, um, it's just a situation I think where people have to be open and um, it kind of gets back to that co-opetition idea because if you have something, I mean, one of the things we're finding with the community that we're building is that people are able to do business with each other because there's a piece that maybe you don't have with your startup, but other people do, and you can partner with them. So we're seeing a fair amount of that kind of partnering together, and I think it's just a philosophy that we have that we're able to relay to the community to say, let's work together on some of these things. So it's just something that's been in my head forever.
one of my questions would have been, but you probably already said this, the answer. With all the hats that you've worn, so social services, regulation, conferences, community building, which version of Sue Schneider feels the most you?
I think it's pulling people together. I've just always done that, even in volunteer things that I do. I gravitate toward that kind of thing.
Mm.
So I don't know why I have that. Um, I guess maybe it's just something related to how I grew up, was trying to pull people together and all pull in the same direction for getting something affected that you may not have been able to do on your own.
Mhm. Mm. Is there anything? that you'd like to see in the industry before you step away?
Um, well, I mean, given what we're working on today, I really would like to see some real emphasis given on how you support innovative ideas, because this is an industry that the consumers require new things. They expect new things. They want to see things keep up, especially as you're trying to attract younger and younger audiences. Um, you know, it was the same with our slots in a land-based casino are going to be old because people are used to now playing video games, and they just want more stimulation. They want things delivered differently and that sort of thing. So I think that's probably my biggest concern, is trying to set up some systems that will allow for that in a mutually beneficial way. And I also think and it's partially, I think, because of my social service background, is the emphasis on player protection and keeping people safe that are vulnerable is really, really important. But I think the industry overall does a pretty good job at that, for the most part. I think hopefully it's a mindset that's at least built into most suppliers and operators, because the regulators know to require that and do require that. So, but we have an obligation to do that anyway. When we had GIGSE, we always did a fundraiser at that. We did and it would benefit, one of the um, councils on problem gambling and that sort of thing. We did sumo wrestling, we did Segway races, we did all kinds of fun stuff as fundraisers, because we have an obligation to support those organizations.
And how would you like to be remembered in iGaming history?
Um, I don't know. I guess just connecting people is my favorite thing to do, and hopefully I'm successful at that. I've had other people who there's a young woman that I've mentored some, and she's like, I look at how you do introductions in your emails, and I've started doing that because she has the same philosophy, that she wants to try to connect people in a way that's going to be good for both of them and good for whatever effort it is that they're trying to put forward. So that part, I guess I've kind of refined that part. So spreading that work is fun.
You will definitely be remembered for that. Absolutely. Is there anything that I haven't asked you, but you think it's important that we should add?
Red Cross, and working on floods, because I've lived on the main channel of the Mississippi River and been flooded many, many times. So I got involved in efforts in the past to help with disasters, and I haven't had a chance to do that much in the last few years. But I mean, it's an amazing experience, and I always tell people, just if you get a chance to volunteer at anything, really. I mean, I think it's important. So I love when I see people in the industry doing volunteer projects. There are several efforts that go on with it, that put events on, whether it's like SBC does a boxing event, or Oliver's Wish that does some fundraising and things like that. I just think that's important to factor that in. There was one company that I did some consulting with, and once a month they would have their whole staff go do one volunteer. They would work at a soup kitchen, or they would go on a environmental cleanup day or whatever. And I think working those kind of things into your company culture is something that I would recommend for people. So I would hope that maybe they would take advantage of that, because you get back so much more than you give when you get involved with things like that.
I appreciate you, Sue. Thank you very much for what you've done, for what you're doing. For everybody watching us, I'll leave the details about Sue. Follow her on LinkedIn. She's very active and she keeps up with everything that's going on in the news very efficiently. So thank you for that as well. I see your posts. There are like 19 posts every day.
I know I'm very it goes back to my days when I had River City Group, that we would get these print publications in, and I would put a little sticky on something for one staff to read that one, and I can't stop myself. That's the electronic sticky, is putting that out there. But when I go places, people say, "Ooh, I follow you," and I get some really good stuff. So it's worth it.
100%. I read some of them myself. So thank you. And you really stand out because it's like when it's Sue, Sue, Sue. Oh, again. So you know how to draw the attention very well.
I try.
Sue Schneider, everybody. Thank you very much, Sue, for your contributions to the show, to the industry, to what it is you're doing. Everybody follow Sue and stay tuned for more iGaming history.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.